This guy walks in looking like a fucking Hemsworth and was like chatting about yoga to me, and I was just sitting there like, hi Booktube, it's Marianne at the last of my book, and today I am going to apologise in advance before I even talk about anything. So my hay fever is absolutely uncontrollable. It has escalated to the point where hay fever medication is no longer working. I sound like this and I keep sneezing, so there's probably going to be more jump cuts than usual, if that's even possible. And also, I have no makeup around my nose because I've spent the whole day blowing my nose and sneezing, and I am just straight up not having a good time. But as they say, the show must go on, and yeah. So the reason that we are here, the reason we are assembled, is to wrap up the books I read in the first half of July. So I lost all the footage from the second half of June, and I really don't have the time or energy to refilm it, but we had the historical romance readathon at the end of June and beginning of July. So the first 3 books were part of the historical romance readathon, which went spectacularly. So the first book I finished this month was Olivia and the Masked Duke by Grace Callaway, which was the group read for the historical romance readathon. So this was an age gap romance with an unrequited love element. So Olivia was rescued by the Duke of Hadley when she was 12 or something like that, and then he went away. She was like obsessed with him, loved him, and yeah, that was the thing. But then he comes back into her life and he starts to develop an interest in her. What I did appreciate about this dad's friend romance was, even though he had known her since childhood and had been there for her and protecting her and rescuing her and all of that, there was no grooming element. He was not showing any interest when she was underage, and it wasn't until like she was an adult that things happened, and he began noticing his interest in her and all of that. So alongside the romance that's developing, Olivia is this really kind of curious individual, and she ends up joining a society, which, by the way, Charlie, the woman that runs this secret society, is called the Society of Angels, and it took me to about 70% of the way through the book to make the connection Charlie's Angels. So I felt a bit stupid. So she's investigating crimes, and he has this kind of vigilante vibe going, but they both are kind of like investigating the same thing. So there's this, so they have got rid of opium from London, or at least sort of tamping down on it, but then a new drug comes in and is everywhere. So they're trying to track down where it's coming from and all of that sort of thing to get rid of it. Now, alongside this, the Duke of Hadley is this tortured hero. He has some shitty stuff that's happened in the past that he blames himself for, beats himself up about, and he ended up becoming addicted to opium. And what I appreciated was there was no demonising of drug addiction. It was very focused on recovery and how drug addiction has an impact on someone's life, the process of recovery, etc, etc. Also, there was more nuanced kind of discussions happening within the story. I swear to God, if I sneeze again, I'm going to cut my own nose off. I don't know where I got to in that sentence because I sneezed. There were also some more nuanced kind of discussions happening throughout the book surrounding like women's rights back in those times, and especially within a marriage, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, and all of that, which, you know, I really appreciate in historical romance. It's a thing I always seem to talk about whenever I'm reviewing a historical romance, so loved that. And also, it was really subtle, but there was also implied critique of racist ideology in there, because a lot of people were blaming the Chinese for this drug coming into the country, and it sort of explored that kind of very British mindset of blame the foreigner, which is a thing still, unfortunately. And also, what I loved about the plot, the spy element, the romance, is sometimes the plot can overtake the romance, sometimes the romance can overtake the plot, and you don't have this happy medium. But with the book, they managed to have this plot of the kind of murder, mystery, drug thing happening, but they also had the romance unfolding really well alongside that. So I really, really loved that. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Trigger warning for discussion of suicide, murder, and drug addiction. Oh, and one criticism, the criticism that I had that I almost forgot to state. The one thing I did not like about this, and the reason that I gave it 4 stars, was the fact that there was all of this build up and there was all of this tension towards the sex scenes in the book, but then when it actually happened, they were either really underwhelming or really cringy. Just some of the language that was used, it was kind of uncomfortable, and I just wasn't really vibing with it. But aside from that, it was really good. This lighting is so weird. What is happening there? The next book I read in the first half of the month was Tempest by Beverly Jenkins, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. So this story centres around the characters of Regan and Colton. Colton is the doctor in this small town. He is widowed and he is a single dad, and Regan is basically a mail order bride. So Colton's looking for a female motherly figure to stand in and make sure that his daughter Anna, I think her name was, has someone fulfilling a motherly role there. He's a doctor, he's a busy man, he's got a lot going on, so he's trying to split his time. And Regan comes into the picture, but they have like the best meet cute that has ever existed in romance ever. She accidentally shoots him. Well, she doesn't accidentally shoot him, she kind of shoots him on purpose, but she thinks that he has ulterior motives. But like I said when I was discussing this book in my TBR, sometimes it's like that. You just have to shoot a guy to see if yous are compatible. So Regan is the epitome of the strong female character. She is this gun-wielding, well-educated woman who is in control of her finances, it's in control of her life, and she really steps up to the plate when it comes to Colton's daughter. The relationship between Regan and Colton's daughter was absolutely beautiful, and what stood out to me with the relationship is that Regan didn't go out of her way to avoid the discussion of Anna's biological mum. They discussed her all of the time. They discussed her a lot, and also she discussed Colton's wife, and also discussed Colton's previous wife with Colton himself. So there's no like desecrating of her memory. Like there was nothing that would make you feel uncomfortable and be like, well, he's quite clearly just forgot about her, even though she was supposedly the love of his life. So I loved that. So the villain in this story, we had Colton's wife's sister, so Colton's ex-sister-in-law, who is Anna's aunt, basically wants to take care of Anna and doesn't like Regan because she's stepping in to fill in this motherly position, which would be understandable if Minnie was a nice person and actively was good at looking after children and was a good person, etc, etc. But instead Minnie is literally the worst. She goes out of her way to tell Anna that she is basically the reason that her own mum is dead, and makes her feel terrible about herself, which obviously as a kid you shouldn't be having those kinds of feelings, because I think she's only 11 or something like that, so at a very impressionable age, and she's being told stuff like you killed your mum, is because of you that she's dead and stuff like that. So she was really mistreating Anna when she was looking after her. So Colton was wanting to sort of get that gone, but she also has this delusional plot in her head that she's gonna take Anna away to live with her elsewhere, and Colton's just like nope, and Regan's just like nope. and they end up falling in love with each other, which was really wholesome to watch unfold, especially because Regan was the strong female character, because she was allowing the vulnerability there to fall in love with someone else while taking care of a home, because it wasn't as if she was just like doing housekeeping and looking after Colton's daughter. She was also out like doing hard work, and she was doing DIY, and she's completely revamping this whole place and doing things that probably wouldn't be considered her job to do. But she was like, no, I'm not lazy, I refuse to do this, come on, let's go. And she ends up taking on a job as a teacher without any experience whatsoever. Like, she is honestly amazing. I loved her so much. I thought that she was a wonderful character, and I was a massive fan. The only reason that I gave it 4 stars instead of 5 was simply because I wasn't particularly invested in Colton and Regan's relationship. I was more invested in Regan herself and Regan's relationship with Colton's daughter. Like, I could give or take those two. Although the romance was good and the steam was good, I was so focused on like what was happening with the heroine and the daughter that I just could have done without the romance. This could have literally just been a piece of historical fiction about a stepmom coming in, and I would have still been happy. The next book I read was Dreaming of You by Lisa Kleypas, and I gave this one 5 stars. I have been wanting to read this book for ages, and it was because I had saw Crystal at Crystal's Bookish Life talking about this book. I say talking about it, she was raving about it, and I was like, right, this I need to get round to this. And then eventually I got round to it, and I totally see what the fuss was about. So this one is about Sarah and Derek. So Derek Craven is basically notorious for being this rakish gambling hall owner. The gambling den that he runs, they have sex workers there, there's loads of sort of stuff happening, and he is kind of closed off to having a relationship because reasons. And Sarah is this bookish woman. She writes novels about sex workers, and she likes to do her own research in her books instead of just making stuff up. So she goes to Derek's sort of gambling den hall club thing, and she ends up in a relationship with Derek, which is spicy yet wholesome. So we had the damaged hero, forced proximity, sort of grumpy sunshine kind of vibe, and it was just really, really good. There was nothing, the plot was consistent, the romance was wonderful, the steam was perfect, everything about this book was exquisite, and I have zero complaints. Also, there was a point in this book where I literally sobbed because it was so heartbreaking. So we thought something was going to happen, and then we didn't know if it did happen or not, and a character felt a certain way, and it was just really heart-wrenching, and I cried a lot. So yes, I gave this one 5 stars, and also there is a content warning for attempted sexual assault, not by the main character. So after the books that I read for the historical romance readathon, I decided to read the Nashville Neighborhood series. I vlogged the experience, so I will link the video in the description box below. And I loved this series. So it's an erotic romance series with some forbidden relationships, taboo relationships, stuff like that. So I'll give you a quick rundown of my feelings. The first book in the series was The Doctor. The series is by Nikki Sloane, should have said that already. And The Doctor is an age gap romance with the heroine's ex-boyfriend's dad. Like I said in the vlog, when I was looking through Goodreads, I saw Riley Marie describe this as the middle ground between Birthday Girl and Your Dad Will Do, and that sums it up perfectly. I loved the hero in this. Dr. Lowe was a king. I loved him. I was here. I was feeling feelings for Dr. Lowe, and I had a dream about Dr. Lowe the night that I finished reading it. And you know, I've thought about it quite a lot since, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. However, the only time I have ever seen a doctor that would possibly make me die on the spot was one day I went to hospital in an ambulance and I looked absolutely horrific. Which really shouldn't have been that big a concern, but while I'm in the room waiting on a doctor to come and sort of evaluate my situation, run some tests and all of that, this guy walks in looking like a fucking Hemsworth and was like chatting about yoga to me, and I was just sitting there like, where did they find you? Were you sculpted by God? Did they create you in a machine? Like, this guy, oh my god. Anyway, but he was like quite young. He wasn't like the daddy that is Dr. Lowe. So, where was I? I sort of ventured off in the Hemsworth Doctor story. Yeah, so, obviously it's a forbidden romance, it's a taboo romance, it's an age gap romance, and it was really well done. Again, like I said in the vlog, Nikki Sloane writes really excellent sex scenes, so they were done really well. None of them were repetitive, and considering I read the 3 Nikki Sloanes one after the other, literally finished one and then started the next one, and there was no sort of repetition or boredom or skim reading involved. Like, I was invested in every single word. I have to say that the series is a winner. But yeah, the relationship between Cassidy and Dr. Lowe, I really enjoyed it. I thought because the books were short, I wasn't really going to be invested in the relationships because I thought it was just going to be a real insta-love vibe. And I know that people like criticise people who don't like insta-love or don't believe in it. It's not that I don't believe in it, it's just I don't like it in my books because I like to see something unfold. I like to see development when I read a book, so I like to see the romance come to fruition. But this was so good, and I think the advantage that these 3 books had is instead of going from insta love to sexual experience, they go from insta lust and then the sex and then the falling in love while this is happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can have love kind of happen quickly without it being insta love. Does that make sense? I'm going to assume it makes sense and move on kind of swiftly. So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. I loved it. The next book in the series was The Pool Boy, and this was an age gap romance with an older woman and a younger man. So the female character, Erica, I think her name was, ends up falling for her best friend's son, Troy, who is her pool boy. But she is like a music executive, agent, manager-esque kind of person, and Troy is a musician, and she tries to take him, and she takes him under her wing. So not only is it the best friend's son, it's also a kind of like power imbalance in the workplace kind of vibe. Again, love to see how that unfolded because she had been cheated on by her husband and was feeling all kinds of ways about herself, and she was overcoming that and then coming to terms with who she was as a person, that she was worthy of love, that she could let Troy love her, and that she could love Troy. And you know, it was really beautifully done, masterfully done. And I gave this one 5 stars as well. I absolutely loved it. The 3rd book in the series was The Architect, and this was the only one that I had like a vague issue with. The Architect was based around the characters of Lilith, Clay, and then further into that, Mr. E. So Lilith and Clay end up co-adopting a cat because Lilith is a veterinary technician and Clay knows this, goes ask for help because he thinks he's knocked a cat down with his car, and they end up jointly adopting this cat, as you do. But then when he is away working and she goes over to check on the cat, she realises that he makes BDSM furniture, which she is very, very interested in. And she decides to make a move. So the two of them end up developing a dominant submissive relationship, and he is introducing her to sort of the world of kink and things that can be explored and all of that sort of business. But because he works away quite a bit, because he is an architect as well as this sexy furniture builder, so what's essentially happening is Mr. E, the proxy, is doing what Clay would normally be doing with Lilith while Clay watches and instructs, and he sets up the scenes with Mr. E, and then it's discussed with Lilith, and then it takes place. So yeah, love that. I gave it 4.5 stars simply because there was a major plot development towards the end, which I did not like. I did not appreciate. It bordered on cheating, really, and that is something I can't vibe with in a book. I'm not triggered by it, I just don't like it, and I don't want to read it. Because when I'm reading love, I want to read love. I don't want to read about people that are betraying each other and all of that. So yeah, that was my only complaint with The Architect. Overall, the trilogy, I don't know whether they call it a series or a trilogy, because I don't know if there's going to be more coming, because there is one character in particular that I need to see get her comeuppance. And I think that, okay, hear me out when I say this. So, the two characters that I really hate in this series so far are Judy, who is the nosy neighbour. She's basically started this neighbourhood watch, like, witch hunt thing where she's just like having a go at all the neighbours and wants to cause trouble, and I can't stand her. And also Preston, who is Cassidy's ex-boyfriend, who was a piece of shit in general, right? I think that there should be some sort of thing happen between those two, because as much as I hate both of them, maybe it'll turn them into better people, because falling in love can sometimes turn someone into a better person because they realise their faults as a person and actively make up for their misdemeanors in the past. So that would be intriguing. That would be intriguing. But I don't know. So I don't know if there's going to be any more books. I really hope there is, because I absolutely loved those three. The next book I read was Set by Alexandria House, and I gave this one 3 stars. This one is about Set and Karima. This is more of a novella length book. Karima and Set met each other at a high school reunion and ended up developing a long distance relationship, which none of their family or friends know about. They know that they're seeing someone, they just don't know who it is. I loved that in such a short period of time you were able to see two characters fully fleshed out, know their backstory, be invested in the two of them being together, and that was impressive. My issues with this book were more about the sex scenes, and which is weird because usually that's something I end up praising, and on Goodreads it seems to be the thing that most people are raving about, but I didn't really like them. I don't know what it was about them I didn't like. It felt very, very repetitive. And also, I've been sort of hoping to stumble upon a book where our heroine squirts, okay? Where we have female ejaculation, okay? I'm not ashamed to admit it. It's something that I've been looking for in my romantic fiction, erotic romance, all of that. And I finally got it. I finally got it in this book, and I was delighted. But then Set kept going on about it over and over. We get the point. I don't need to read the word squirt every page or every second page. I did feel like the sex scenes weren't really for me, but that's my own personal opinion. I like what I like, you like what you like, we all like what we like. Doesn't work for everybody. Not everything works for everybody. But yeah, loved the fact that I was invested in the two of them, even over such a short period of time. So the last book that I read in the first half of the month is my new favourite historical romance of all time, and that is Romancing the Duke by Tessa, which is the first book in the Castles Ever After series, and I cannot tell you how much I love this book. I was sobbing like a baby, to the point where I was kind of wanting to start from the beginning and read it again as soon as I'd finished it. So we have Ransom, who is the tortured hero. He is scarred, he is blind, he has been dealt a pretty shitty hand in the past with things that have happened in his life. And we have Izzy, who is considered plain, and in historical romance terms, the word plain suggests not very attractive, not necessarily ugly, but not like startlingly beautiful. So she grew up around fairy tales. Her dad wrote fairy tales, but there's more to that. You'll have to read the story to find out. But as she got older, and both her parents died, and she was left destitute and didn't find love, and was plain when all of her other friends were like beautiful women and stuff like that. She kind of gave up on the concept of fairy tales and romance and happily ever afters, and then she finds out that she's inherited this castle. But it turns out that the castle isn't actually empty. The Duke is still living there, and that's the whole thing that unfolds throughout the book, and they end up falling for each other, and the banter between the two main characters is great. And this, like, I loved the way that they were sniping at each other. And you know, Ransom was the grumpy tortured hero, but he still had a sense of humour. He still had sarcasm, he still had fire in his loins, he still had a heart, and he was just... Izzy also thought that when she was starting to get into this relationship and he was finding her attractive, she was sort of undervaluing herself because she'd always been viewed as plain and unattractive, and thought, well, because he's blind, he doesn't know what I look like, so he's not going to care, without realising that he could actually sort of see. There were moments in certain situations, in certain atmospheres, that he could actually see something. So he does actually know. I feel like Ransom's portrayal of blindness was done really well, because I think with visual impairment like that, it can sometimes be misunderstood. Like people will think you're either blind or you're not. You either can't see at all, or obviously, like with any disability, it's not a one size fits all kind of done. So I like the fact that they included the fact that he could still see slightly in certain situations and certain lighting and stuff like that. But yeah, overall, like, this story was perfect from start till finish. The relationship, the tension, the chemistry between the characters, the plot surrounding it, the conflict in this book. There was no third act breakup. The conflict wasn't between the characters, it was an external conflict, and it was perfect. It was so well done. So yeah, I loved it. Loved everything about it. It was a lot steamier than I was expecting it was going to be, because I thought it was going to be quite tame, because some historicals can be kind of a little bit spicy, and then that's it. But yeah, it was much steamier than I thought it was going to be, and I am not complaining about that. I was a fan, I loved it. But yeah, totally. In fact, do you know what? See if I could give 6 stars, 7 stars, 8 stars. See if I could give this 10 stars, and the limit wasn't only 5, I would give it a solid 10 stars. I loved this book, and I genuinely think, and I genuinely mean it when I say this is my new favourite historical romance of all time. So I've been really struggling making this video due to the allergy situation. Between blowing my nose and sneezing and coughing, and my eyes are watering so bad because they are itchy. So I'm going to sign this off here. I tried to keep it kind of brief. So as usual, any important links will be in the description box, along with any videos that I mentioned throughout this wrap up. along with all of my social medias where you can find me online. You can add me, you can follow me, we can be friends, we can talk about books. It'll be a fun time. And this is the point where I would normally offer some positive advice or say something uplifting, but to be honest, I feel like death. So I'm just going to wish you well and hope that you're having a nice day. Hope you're having a nice evening. Hope you're having a nice afternoon. I don't know what time of the day. If you have allergies, if you have hay fever, please, for the love of God, remember to take your medication. Please remember to buy your medication buy soft tissues, because you don't want to rip your nose to shreds. Don't bother wearing makeup because you will wipe off like your. Get some sodium crimo, whatever it's called, crimologic blah blah eye drops, because they are literally the best thing ever. And get some bikinis or bikinis. And just remember, it's not your fault that you're allergic to outside. It's outside's fault. And if, like me, you're a person who enjoys being outdoors and being in the forest and being in the woods, but yet the woods and forests and the plants, take my prior advice for managing your hay fever symptoms and go spend some time in nature. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Stay safe, happy reading, and I'll speak to you later.